right, guys, I want to welcome everybody to another Tuesday edition of Nomberg Law Live. And as we do each Tuesday, we try to bring interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And my guest today, Birmingham attorney Trace Westbrook. It's complicated to narrow down the topics of interest with Trace, but we're going to try to get there. How are you doing today, bud?
Doing great, Bernard. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I sure appreciate you making some time. This is going to be a fun conversation for us. And for those of you who don't know Trace, he's an attorney in Birmingham, but so much more. He is a collector of sports cards. He and his granddaughter are out at the show this weekend. But one of the things that I also really want to talk about is Trace's love of hiking, something that I share a passion for with him. I don't get quite to Trace's levels with those things, but we're going to just talk a little bit about the importance of getting outdoors, breaking out of a routine. And Trace, before we get to that, share a little bit about yourself and your practice, and then maybe how did you get into hiking and why did it become so important to you and your family?
Sure. Well, I work with Harris and Harris. We're a boutique firm, do mainly business litigation. And I've been with them basically since law school for, closing on over 25 years now.
Wow.
When it comes to hiking, I guess I started, the year I started, I was going to turn 50. I decided I wanted to start getting out more and do more things and just be outside more. When I was growing up, we did a lot of traveling. My dad was in the Air Force. So we traveled all over the world, and he was good about getting us out and doing things. As I grew older and got into practice, and I just kind of got out of getting outdoors so much for hiking. And I decided when the year I turned 50, I said, well, I want to start seeing the world in this country and experiencing it, not just like driving by and waving and saying, hey, there's the Grand Canyon. That's, good view, and let's head somewhere else. I wanted to experience places, go places, and kind of immerse myself in them. And that's how I got into hiking. It's just I want to do some backpacking and hiking, and I just fell in love with it.
Do you remember the first adventure that you took when you started on these journeys?
Sure. The very first, I guess you'd say, big hike, our big backpacking trip was a place called North Cascades National Park up in. Until I actually found out about it, I'd never even heard of North Cascades National Park, and it is one of the least visited national parks, even though it's only about 3 hours from Seattle, 3 hours northeast of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a photograph of somebody of a hiker standing with these dramatic sawtooth type mountains, as far as you could see in the background. Like, oh wow! And so we started planning that, and I'm a compulsive planner, so I plan and I research. And this is the best thing, I come down with agendas, and they change, and they modify, and even after we get there, they'll change. But I go there with a plan, and of course, the first thing that happens is once you get punched in the face, the plan goes out the door. Well, you get there, and then something happens that, well, I try to, the plan changes. But for this first hike, we did the two major hikes I wanted to do, which was an overnight hike in the eastern part of the North Cascades, and then the big hike was up to a place called Sahaley Glacier, which was the scene of the picture that I saw in Backpacker magazine. So we hiked up there, camped on the glacier, and came down the next day. And that was our first real experience with elevation too, because we went, it was about 6,000 feet of elevation, which was a lot. We've done a few minor hikes around here, day hikes, try to get ready, but there's nothing preparing you for that.
Well, I was going to say, Trace, you can prepare, you can plan out, you can have all the gear, and you can even work out in similar conditions, the best that you can in our part of the country. But one thing you have no control over is the weather. And I guess you have to be prepared for all of that. And these are not just you hiking in and hiking out and then go and stay at a hotel. You're much more involved in that. You're actually camping and the like. So share a little bit about some of those experiences, because for those of us who work in a desk setting, and for those of us who are, with what they call the white collar profession, this is the complete opposite and so necessary for mind, body, and health and spirit. So talk a little bit about the overnight experience and why it's important.
The overnight experience, I enjoy it for there's so many aspects of it, but I'd say the first part is getting out and kind of being on your own, and having that is not necessarily a huge challenge, but it is a little bit of a challenge. You're out there and you're by yourself. I like the solitude. I like to get to the wherever we're going, wherever the plan is, to make that space, make that place. You have a kind of a sense of accomplishment. You get there, you set up, and I always try to get to a place where you can camp and just have a gorgeous view wherever you are. But yeah, it was odd, the idea of sleeping on the ground. People are like, "Oh, are you crazy?" And my wife, even when I first started it, she was like, "Well, you told me when we got married we were going to be staying in nice hotels, things like that." I was like, "Well, things have changed. I want to try this." And she's hopped right into it and loves it. And she is really takes care of all the details. She makes sure there's the things that I wouldn't think about. I just take a backpack and a tent and a sleeping bag and maybe a pad. She makes sure we have a nice pillows and things like that I don't necessarily think about.
Well, I'm gonna do a share screen, and can you see that photo now, Trace?
Yes, that
Talk
is
to us.
Okay. That hike to Saheli Glacier I was just talking about. That was our very first backpacking trip up the North Cascades, and that is actually a pass called Cascade Pass, which is kind of famous among hikers and backpackers. It's just a gorgeous pass, and you can see the picture doesn't do it justice. It's just see down that beautiful valley, and you got the craggy, rocky, jagged peaks in the background with the glaciers and snow. And when it comes to weather, now for this trip, we had beautiful weather because I did a little bit. Part of my research is finding out when is the best time of year, because I know that the Pacific Northwest is notorious for being very rainy.
Mm-hmm.
And I did my research, and I basically found that around the time of Labor Day is as good a chance as you'll get of having a lot of days that are clear. And so we scheduled this, which is great because obviously you have Labor Day holiday, so we scheduled it for that week. And the weather was just like you see there. It was just.
I was going to say, it looks like you had idyllic weather, but there's so many. Gosh, we could spend the next hour just going through your photos, but I want to step back from specific trips, and I want you to share with us a little bit about the impact of doing these trips from either a health standpoint, mind, body, and spirit, physical. I mean, obviously, it's a very physical activity that you're doing. You have to be committed to do something like this, but how has it helped you from a balance standpoint, professional versus personal balance?
Oh, it's helped me tremendously. When you get out there, I try to put everything away and just focus on what I'm doing, and you're living in the moment. It's kind of like a downloading of everything and not worrying about the rest of the world when you're out there. When you're even on short hikes, it doesn't have to be a backpacking hike, but I like to hike around here, the parks around here in Alabama, and you just get out, and after 10 or 15 minutes on the trail, you're not worried about whatever's going on in the real world. You're enjoying the hike, and for me, that's just it's just a necessary, I guess, downtime where I'm enjoying the hike going on at work. Now, sometimes I do think about what's going on at work, and and sometimes I come up with ideas that are half baked. Sometimes I come up with ideas that are pretty good. But generally, once you get into it, you're not thinking about anything except what you're doing there at the moment, and you can just kind of clear your mind. Physically, I just to do these hikes, I always start training, and I'm hiking around here, and I'm walking and doing treadmills. For some of the mountaineering type things, I do hop on a stair climber for an hour a day for a while. And fortunately, so far, I've been physically able to do everything I wanted to do. There have been some things that I thought, gosh, I'm not sure I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
The training was worse than what this is.
Well, Trace, I was going to ask you, Birmingham is blessed and our state is blessed with such varied topography. And sometimes when I'm hiking locally, I'll see people training and they'll have the big packs on, like was in your photo, and it's their way of preparing to go out west somewhere or maybe to Europe, wherever they may be going. Where would you suggest, let's say that a person wants to start planning a trip, and it's not just day hiking, they want to spend several days maybe out in Washington or Utah, somewhere where there's these well-known areas of our country to hike. What would you suggest for somebody who is just getting into it or maybe not quite experienced? They can do day hikes, but they've never done something like this. How would they start getting themselves prepared? Because just showing up and having the enthusiasm is not going to cut it most of the time, because you really do have to be prepared.
You're right. For backpacking, obviously, the first thing you do is start doing your research. You can do it online. Start finding out the basics, things you have to have, the 10 essentials, which are basically shelter, light. I don't recall all of them right now, but obviously medical kit, weather protection. Learn that stuff, and then I know on Facebook there are groups like there's the Alabama Hiking Club. I think possibly backpacking classes where there'll be a couple of people who are experienced will have a backpacking class, and they'll advertise it a few weeks ahead of time. You can sign up for that. What we didn't have that at the time we did our first hike, but my wife and I did a lot of research, bought the equipment we wanted. Because I'm not in the greatest of shape, we decided to get ultralight equipment, even though we're not ultralight hikers. Ultralight hikers are a whole different breed. And they go out and they live on the people you see on TV. They live on nothing. Well, we've got some of that equipment just because it's lighter, not because we want to be ultralighters, but just because a tent that weighs 3 pounds is a lot, not as heavy as a tent that weighs 6 pounds. Mm-hmm. We can carry more stuff. So we went out in the Cheehaw Wilderness and we camped this one night. Just went in like about a mile and found a spot where we knew we could camp. We're allowed to camp and just set up the tent. That way you're not so far away. If something goes bad, you can pack up and leave. Mm-hmm. So I'd advise that. Do the research online. Get your equipment that you want to get. Listen to other people, but really judge yourself. A lot of people have advice about what to do, what the best footwear is, what the best, and listen to those people. But when it comes down to it, whatever you're most comfortable with, and what fits you best, and then either take a backpacking class, which is a good thing to do, or just go out about a mile. You can go to Cheehaw, you can go to Sipsey Wilderness, you can go to Walls of Jericho, lots of places up on Oak Mountain, and on Lookout Mountain, like DeSoto National State Park. Just go in, hike in just a little bit and camp, or even camp at a campground. I was just thinking about that. At DeSoto, they have campgrounds right there. Get a feel for the camping and make sure you enjoy that and learn. Every time I go out, I learn something, usually from a mistake I've made. Mm-hmm. I forgot, I didn't do this. And I said, oh, I'll know that next time. Yeah. I do that every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certainly some excellent Facebook groups, and I've joined a couple of them a few years ago, and just the amount of knowledge that people are willing to share. You're right. Do your own research, make your own decisions, but you can gather as much information as you really could handle through that. And they do have meetups probably almost every week of the year somewhere in our state or in our part of the country. Trace, let's talk about, I've got so many places to go with you here, but talk to us a little bit about any encounters that you've had with wildlife that you've had to deal with. I know you've seen birds of prey, but what about on the ground? Have you had any encounters at this point that you've had to deal with?
Yes, a few. A couple times, and actually on our hike in the North Cascades, we came across a bear that was just kind of sitting on a edge of a snowbank, but we could see him. The trail you're up on top of a ridge. You can see for, about a mile or so. And he was about several hundred yards ahead of us, just sitting there. And he wasn't going anywhere, but he wanted to attack us, but we didn't want to have to walk right by him. So we just had to kind of wait for him. We had a little break, and we sat, we'd watch him. And finally, he disappeared into the woods. And after a few more minutes, we said, okay, maybe it's safe to go in. So we started hiking it. And actually, when we got to the spot where he was, we just looked to the left, and we saw his butt as he was going down the other way. Before we got there. On a recent trip to Yosemite, I was hiking down. We did a 3-night deal there, my wife and I, and that's a gorgeous place, by the way. And I was just walking next to a creek. I heard a commotion. I looked, and I'd scared a bear who was just drinking out of the creek, and he was just, again, I saw him turn and run up the hill. And then that night we did our camp, set up our camp. We were both laying there. It's like 4:30 or 5 in the afternoon. We set up the camp, set up the tent, just laid there and resting for a while. They heard some rustling. I'm like, okay, whatever, And then I heard some more rustling. My wife said, "Go look at that." I looked out. It was a bear just walking by, and he crossed the trail from us, and he went on, and he stopped. And he was rooting through dead trees, trying to find bugs and ants and things. And I just stood there, and I was like, okay, if he acknowledges us, I'm not going to try to scare him away. If he's not paying attention to me, then I'm not going to try to scare him away. I'm just going to let him go. And he didn't pay any attention to us. And if he had, I would have had to jumped up and down and tried to scream at him. Yeah. Which I asked the ranger in Yosemite. I said, "Okay, bear spray. We have bear spray. Should we take? What's the bear conditions?" He's like, "Oh, don't take bear spray. You don't need bear spray. Just yell at them." Like, yeah, that's easy to say when you're there. It's different when you're out there. But 99.9% of the time they're going to turn and run away. Yeah. And this one, I was just the most, not dangerous, but the most confrontational beast I've had was in Zion. I was biking in Zion National Park, and at the very end of the road, there was a turkey. And the turkey, he was a tom turkey, and he was had his feathers all out, and he was not going to let me go past him. So I just had to wait for a while. And he got his little brood across the street, and then he followed them. But he stood there. He was not moving his ground. It's like a goose. The geese, they'll attack. Yeah. Same way. And I was on a bike, and I wasn't in any, condition to say, okay, I'm just going to take on a turkey. So I let him go. And it was fun to watch.
I'm sure the turkey was fun to watch. You get my heart rate up listening to the bear stories.
Well,
that's for sure.
Bears, they always get your heart rate up when you're out there. Like when the bear when I saw him rooting through the tree, and he took off and left us alone. But for a while that night, we're out here by ourselves, and you think, God, what if he comes back? But he didn't come back.
What?
And
go ahead.
Oh, I say, and in other wildlife, we see deer all the time. Deer in national parks, they know they're safe, and so you can almost walk up to them. You can't really walk up to them, but you can be 10 feet of them, and they'll just continue eating, continue grazing. Same thing with like bighorn sheep. They're standoffish, and as long I've seen them. Where it was in Texas over Christmas. I was doing a hike in a canyon. I heard these rocks falling. I looked, and this bighorn sheep up on the side of the cliff. It was like 24 of them. But they always had one of them who was just kind of standing there looking at me. Wasn't grazing, wasn't doing anything. He was like the guardian, I guess. He just stood there and looked at me. He was staring me down, and the rest of them were like moving around, eating the little shrubbery and stuff. That was pretty cool to see that, because I've never seen that many of them.
Yeah, I bet that was cool. We were 4-wheeling in the mountains in Utah in July, and a deer darted right in front of our path, probably 15, 20 feet. Had we been going faster, it would have been a closer encounter. I was glad it was further away, but that deer paid no real attention to us. It just wanted to get across the path. And I guess they're kind of used to seeing humans a little bit, I would assume, in that area. Trace, I want to talk about the importance of having a partner with you. You had a big spill last year that you've recovered from, and hopefully you're now back to full function. But why is it important not to go alone? We always hear these stories, these books that are written about these, I'm going to call them romantic journeys or finding yourself journeys up the Pacific Crest or the Appalachian, wherever they may be. But these people are usually traveling alone, and they're dealing with things. And I guess that's part of their journey. But why is it important to go with a partner or with others in your group?
I think it's important, certainly for safety's sake. For one, you have somebody there who can help you out if you need to. You're talking about last year in the Grand Tetons, I fell off some ice, a snowbank collapsed on me, and I fell and broke my neck. And my buddy and others who were around, helped save my life, I guess. I consider they did, because we were at least 9 miles from the trailhead, and without him there, if it was solo, I'd have had to just wait for somebody else. As it was, he's able to get somebody else, and using a satellite texting phone, we're able to get the helicopter to come pick me up and carry me out of there. For me, it's also about this companionship and having somebody to share something with my wife, or it's a good friend. It's just fun to share. To me, it's just fun to share the whole experience. I've never been a solo hiker. I've never really had desire to solo hike. I've done solo day hiking and things like that, but I don't think I've ever backpacked solo. In fact, I know I've never backpacked solo. And a lot of those folks who do the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, they'll be alone for a while, but there's also other people on the trail, and they'll get to know them. And they kind of look out for each other. And of course, some people just go out because they've got some kind of desire to be by themselves and just disappear into the wilderness, which is fine. But that's really not for me. I like to get out there, but I like to share it with somebody. So I guess the sharing aspect of the safety is an added thing, but really it's the sharing the experience, having a friend to share it with.
Yeah, the shared experience is really is part of the whole, for me too, why I go where I go and with whom I go with. But until you've been lost on the backside of Tannehill and your cell phone has died and it's raining and it's about 40 degrees in late November, you really had the full experience. I'll share with you more when we finish, but I did about 14 miles that day. The park rangers ended up having they found me on the service road. It was terrible, but that was my fault in part because I got off the main trails. But because we all have those stories, I'm sure. Guys, I'm talking with Trace Westbrook. We're just sharing some stories about hiking, backpacking, and just getting out into the great outdoors. And Trace, I know you've always got your next trip either planned or you're in the planning stages. Share with us what's in the future. Where are you headed next, or what are you looking at?
Well, we're looking at a couple of things. One is really is more of just a get out and it'll be hiking, I guess. I call it the Northern California Circle. It's going to Crater Lake, Redwoods National Park, and then Lawson Volcanic National Park, which are all right there in the Northern California, Southern Oregon area, within a few hours drive of each other. And that's when I've been planning for me and my wife to go, and we can drive, and it'll be mainly day hikes. I like to try to do an overnight backpacking hike in Redwood National Park, maybe even Crater Lake. But that is one that I've been planning for about this time. It would be in the fall, probably next fall. I say fall, late summer of next year. So we tried to do some around Christmas time during that Christmas break. We've been looking at going down to driving, just taking we have an RV and RVing down to Key West and going out to the Dry Tortugas National Park, and maybe camping there and kayaking around there. And there's some little keys and stuff you can kayak out to and things like that. And then we've talked about more simple, closer in things like the Natchez Trace Parkway. You can drive out there and just take your time. And there are just all sorts of day hikes off the Natchez Trace, starting in wherever, I think south of Vicksburg, Mississippi, and going up to Nashville. We've been looking at that. That'd be like a 4 or 5 day getaway. Nothing extreme, but it's just a fun thing to do.
It is. And folks don't realize in our part of the country, in the state of Alabama alone, how many wonderful trails that there are throughout north to south, east to west. You can pick your topography, you can pick the type of terrain, and you really have such a varied um, things that you can do. Trace, do you have
Oh,
any particular ones you enjoy in our
sure,
state that are maybe driving trips from the metro area?
sure. Obviously, Sipsey Wilderness is a great place. If you like waterfalls, if
Mhm.
you like, it has great. I mean, obviously, this time of year they may be kind of drying up, but in the springtime the waterfalls are running. I've been backpacking there a couple of times, just going in camping and then going and coming back basically,
Mhm.
and walk and doing usually a route, circular route, and just checking out the waterfalls and the river. Um, Going up northern Alabama, obviously on Lookout Mountain, there's several. You've got Little River Canyon,
Mhm.
which has some hikes. You kind of have to make your hikes there because there's not a whole lot of established hikes, but DeSoto State Park has several hikes. And those are fairly easy. And they have some waterfalls. They're not super strenuous. Further on up, you've got Walls of Jericho, which my granddaughter and I did a couple weekends ago. We went to Scottsboro and then drove on up there.
I
And
want to
Walls,
pause you, Trace. I want to pause you. I went to the Walls of Jericho back in late January, and the snow was still on the ground.
oh,
And we did the longer hike, the 3.5 in and out.
yeah,
And the first going in and coming out is like anywhere else. But when you get down to the water and you're on that cliff or the side of the one side of the mountain, and you get all the way to the waterfalls, and it's idyllic.
it
And if
is.
you've never been to it, now there are closer places where you could park. Obviously, you don't have to do the whole thing. But when you get down there, it really is, it takes your breath away momentarily because it
Oh,
truly is a gorgeous area to spend outdoors, even if it's in the snow and the cold weather.
yeah, any time of year. Um, well, yeah, wintertime or spring is the best time of year for that. Wintertime because you get to see the beautiful if it's snowing. And of course, the spring, the water's flowing real well. A couple weekends ago, there was no water at all. We just
Mhm.
wanted to hike down there, and my granddaughter and I, and she'd done it. She didn't even remember it. She was 3 years old. She hiked down there, and I have video of her just with a little hiking pole, and she's just come on,
Mhm.
and she's a trooper. She enjoys hiking. She's more into boulder climbing and things like that. She's 12 now, but
Mhm.
she enjoyed the hike down there down to the Walls of Jericho, and hiking around that you walk back to that little amphitheater type area
Mhm.
at the very back,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
gorgeous, yeah.
it
And
really
it,
is.
it's a good. It also it's good training if you're going to be doing some other hikes. If you want to do mountain hikes, and that's about 800 feet from the top to the bottom, and so you have to climb back out. And climbing back out, as you know, once you cross that creek, it's basically all uphill, about 800, 900 feet to get back to the parking lot.
It really is.
We were able to actually be a trail angel for a guy, a man about my age, and his wife.
Mhm.
Um, we passed, and they were just slower than us, and he'd run out of water. Basically, we both ran out of water, and he was struggling. So we gave him some water, and then we went up to the top, and came back and gave him some bottles of water from our cooler. That kind of stuff pays off. I mean, it comes back to you. I helped a guy in Utah. I helped a guy change a tire in the middle of a road, out in the middle of nowhere. We're talking middle of nowhere, Utah.
Yeah.
And a few days later, my wife was struggling, and a guy picked up her pack and carried her pack for about half a mile. So
Wow.
people do good things, and it comes back and it helps you.
Well, I was
Uh,
going to say, Trace, it's part of the hiking and backpacking community that it still exists. There's some civility. There is some people who they're generous, and
sure.
call it karma, call it whatever you want to call it. But you're right. Being kind to others, it'll come back. It'll come back to you. But Trace, I could talk with you for the next several hours about all of this great stuff. But I know at some point we've got to come to a pause. But I appreciate you sharing a little of your experiences and expertise with us about hiking and backpacking.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it. Anytime you want to talk again, just let me know.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to be calling you offline, and I'm sure we'll get together again soon. But guys, as we do each Tuesday, I try to have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And as you heard firsthand from Trace, he really has a passion for hiking and backpacking. I'm sure you could reach out to him offline and maybe share more tips or experiences. But thank you again, Trace. And guys, as we do each Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, Nomberg Law Live. We hope you continue to be safe out there, make decisions that are best for you and your family, and y'all be well. Take care.